Above the Branik village in the Gorica region stands the Rihemberk Castle, one of the most fascinating and oldest castles in Slovenia. It overlooks the strategic point of transition between the Vipava Valley and the Karst, between continental and Mediterranean Europe. Nowadays, this is a meeting point of two touristically attractive regions. The castle hill was first inhabited in the Bronze Age. Findings testify to the 3,500-year-old settlement, one of the many prehistoric hill forts in these places. The castle was built by the Rihembergians, a noble family of reportedly Tyrolean origin. They settled in the Gorica region in the 12th or 13th century. The preserved parts of the original medieval castle, built almost 800 years ago, can still be recognized. The Romanesque method of construction is characterized by the roughly cut stones stacked in almost parallel rows. The walls of the ancient castle witnessed storms of history, and ownership often changed hands. After the fall of the Rihembergians, who had given their name to the castle, the property belonged to the Counts of Gorica. Later, the Venetians and the Habsburgs fought for it. After the victory of the latter, in the beginning of the 16th century, the castle with its surrounding properties were given to the family of Lantieris, who remained the owners until the end of the Second World War. Over the centuries, the castle changed its character and appearance. From the original, relatively modest military fort, it eventually developed into a luxurious, noble home. Around the year 1230, there was probably just an unpretentious medieval palatium surrounded by high walls. Soon, a mighty defense tower and castle chapel were added. The castle underwent its biggest changes in the 16th and 17th centuries during the Renaissance and Baroque periods. New buildings were erected, and the castle expanded outward with additional defensive structures. The main courtyard was leveled for new times and new uses. The castle was given a luxurious great hall and an extensive library. It was said to be the center of cultural and social life, whose comfort and wealth were described by chroniclers in the 18th century. The ancient castle chapel changed over the centuries as well. The Gothic period gave it piercing windows and a rib vault ceiling, the remains of which still bear witness to the date of renovation, the 1st of August, 1533. The Baroque age added a new facade and renovated altar. The passing of time saw new construction in Rihemberk, but also ruin. Many parts of the original castle aren't standing anymore today. The wonderful view of Branik and the landscape under the castle was not possible from this spot in the past. The most fascinating structure of the castle is a mighty, almost 30-meter-high tower. It was built in the middle of the 13th century at the highest point of the castle hill. The walls of this extraordinary defense structure are about 3 meters thick at the base. They become thinner towards the top, but are still sufficiently massive to hide a spiral staircase leading to the top platform. Were there really prison cells in the tower? Was there really a prisoner in the metal cage high above the ground, saved from starving to death by a castle maiden, as the local legends tell? The main, central part of the castle was intended for living and had more luxurious spaces. The more everyday parts of castle life took place around the southern courtyard, between the stables, the barn, and the blacksmiths. All these disappeared over time. The Rihemberk Castle was originally built as a military fortress. From the very beginning, the castle core was protected by a heavy, over 1 meter thick wall and a mighty tower. In the following centuries, 2 external defense rings with fortified towers and defensive positions were added. The defense of the castle developed and changed in parallel with the development of military technology, especially after the invention of gunpowder. Additional walls were built, as well as a new plateau, defense towers, and cannon positions. But no matter how thick, the walls could not protect the castle from the destructive forces of the 20th century. In the First World War, the castle was spared. It served as a military hospital for the Austro-Hungarian army, which was waging war on the nearby Socha or Isonzo front. The buildings remained more or less intact, but a larger part of the furniture, art, archives, and library were destroyed and lost. During the Second World War, the castle was burned down and mined. By the end of the war, only ruins remained, a mere shadow of its former greatness and luxury. The first repairs on the severely damaged castle commenced soon after the end of the war. Still, throughout most of the post-war decades, the castle stood abandoned over the valley of Branik. This is its past. But a magnificent castle such as Rihemberk does not crumble so easily. Rihemberk has a future. Life is returning to the castle, and with it, the desire for new stories and the will to realize them. Today, Rihemberk Castle is reclaiming a new old role. It is becoming a modern cultural and tourist center for the wider Gorica region and an excellent starting point for exploring and enjoying this sunny part of Mediterranean Slovenia. The castle will also excite nature lovers of all ages, with its mysterious nocturnal residents who have found a safe haven in its old cellars.